the Islam Whisperer. The word love does not appear once in the Quran. There is no love between Muslims and their God. There is no love between Muslims and non-Muslims. Quite the opposite, actually. And according to the Quran, there is no love between Muslims and other Muslims. There are, however, many texts in the Quran and the Hadiths about how a wife may never refuse her husband sex. My favorite is the one about sex on a camel. Islam means to submit. As the slaves of their God, the ones who submitted, Muslims regard themselves as the lords of the earth, the true owners of the earth. Thus, according to twisted Islamic logic, looting and stealing from non-Muslims is, in their eyes, repossessing what is naturally theirs. Non-Muslims, or infidels, are the lowest animal form of life, except for Jewish infidels, which are even worse. When forced conversion to Islam is not practical, intolerance is encouraged, especially if loot can be collected on a regular basis. Murder of infidels is condoned, and temporary peace treaties may be allowed with infidels, provided the final goal is always kept in mind: the eventual destruction of anything non-Islamic. Islam is 1/3 religious force and 2/3 political force. Much of the Quran functions as a rule book for precisely how and when the detested inferior infidel must be conquered, marginalized, humiliated, taxed, converted, and killed. This is the Islamic golden rule. Kick the infidel's butt. The dangerous Muslims, in my view, are the ones who have studied Islam carefully and who take the teachings of Islam seriously. The moderate Muslims are the ones who don't know their own religion or who don't take it seriously. Christianity has an interpretive tradition where the peaceful teachings of Christ tend to overrule the few violent Old Testament passages. In Islam, the many violent, hateful verses have rendered the few peaceful virtues officially null and void. If you want a simplification, Islam is an ass-backwards Christianity. Instead of the Christian impulse to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, it's the Muslim desire to do unto others before they do unto you. Islam divides the world into House of Islam and House of Warfare. War is a major theme of Islam. Any action which expands Islam is a good action. Because Muslims are always praying, or they have just prayed, or they are just about to pray, or they are memorizing some holy words to be recited later, there is a religious spin on everything Muslims think, say, or do. Because infidels are the enemy, the Quran repeatedly forbids Muslims to be friends with infidels. It is perfectly acceptable, however, for Muslims to pretend to be friends with infidels to gain some advantage. The religious leaders in Islam have an inordinate power and influence upon Muslims because the Quran has been randomized and redacted, so it is obscure and difficult to make sense of without expert study involving Islamic texts outside the Quran, particularly the hadiths. Essentially, all the peaceful passages of the Quran have been annulled, voided, reduced to empty words that have no influence upon Islamic law or Muslim behavior by chronologically later passages calling for intolerance and violence toward non-Muslims. Also, Muslims are not allowed to critically examine the Quran, but must accept without question what their religious leaders tell them. Much emphasis is placed upon memorizing and reciting the Quran in the difficult classical Arabic language in use from the 4th to 9th centuries. So most Muslims are saying sounds they do not fully comprehend over and over. As a result of this, many Muslims don't know their own religion, but depend on their religious leaders for instructions. Orders given to Muslims from Islamic religious leaders in a Muslim-majority nation, death to America, death to Israel, an accursed infidel on the other side of the world, burnt the Quran, so boys after service go out and kill me some infidels at the U.S. Embassy. Yeah. Well, this is far different from orders given to Muslims living as minorities in Western nations. Keep your heads down until we get our numbers up. Then jihad. What all Muslims do know is if they quit Islam, they might be killed, possibly by a family member. And at a minimum, they would be forever cutting off all contact between themselves and anyone in their extended family. They would be banished to live in exile